Hi, my name is Steve Tolkowski, and I'm a 3D artist, and I've been working in the industry for 35 years now. Based in Los Angeles, previously I worked at Blue Sky up in New York, directed animation for a couple years. 2008, I decided to start my own independent company designing my own IP. I created a character called Sketchbot as a vinyl toy release in 2010. And for the last 12 years, I've been working primarily as a character designer and 3D modeler, and also getting into VR, working on a VR project at the moment with Epic.
What led you to this crazy world of CG? What thought went to your mind? What did you see that made you want to go to CG?
Star Wars in 1977 was a big influence on me. And then in 1982, when I saw Tron, I think I was kind of convinced that I wanted to do something with computer graphics and animation. I was a musician for many years in high school and college, but also following my art. And I was wanting to be a comic book artist for the longest time. So when I went to college, I took a lot of life drawing classes and art anatomy and started going down that route. But I was always interested in the computer. When I was in school in the mid-'80s, there were no computer graphics classes. So when I went to university, I went to Arizona State, I was all over the campus using CAD software. And then engineering school, I brought my Super 8 camera and I was reverse engineering camera moves, taking frame by frame off the monitor. And then I also got to work over in the architecture building. They had a couple systems over there, and I would do the same. The art school had one Cubicom system on a PC that I didn't really like that software at all, but try to use it. And then when I was in college, I had two jobs. I was the staff artist for the newspaper, and also I was one of the staff artists for the PBS station that was affiliated with the university. And that's where I got to really do my first computer graphics professionally. I worked with a character generator, and we created graphics and animation for a nightly news program called Horizon, using PostScript, back in the day, Quark Express, laying out the magazine that we would print up. But the cool thing about that job experience was that we still had traditional darkroom, and they were doing everything by hand, blue line, cutting and pasting all the stuff together. So we were transitioning into the digital age, and that's how I kind of got hired, because the guy who hired me saw that I had some Macintosh experience. So I got to use that, and through that job at Channel 8, I met my first employers, Rhonda Graphics. Rhonda Olson had worked there previously, and her husband, Scott, was a cameraman at the station. And his brother was a computer science major, and he was my age. So the four of us kind of got together and did 3D animation in Phoenix. We were one of the rare companies doing Wavefront at the time. You should see my badge. 1987 was my first year at SIGGRAPH. So I came as a student volunteer. Was in Anaheim that year. So I remember driving from Phoenix to Anaheim with two friends of mine, and just being blown away at my first convention, just soaking it all up. And it was pretty big at the time, and it was really cool to be part of that. I'll never forget being a runner. Before the show opened, I remember having to go deliver some documents to one of the booths, and as I'm going through the floor, and not realizing that, this is going to open tomorrow, and there's still crates and forklifts and stuff. So I'm running through, and I passed the Pixar booth, and this is when they were still selling hardware. And they had the Japs Raise machine, and then on a monitor, on this old CRT monitor, they had the clown from Redstream and a run cycle. And I kind of stopped, and I was like, oh yeah, this is where I am, And then the next year, I got to go as a representative of Rhonda Graphics. I was still in school, but in 1988, went to Atlanta, got to help evaluate some 3D software. And yeah, from there, I ended up working for 7 years at Rhonda Graphics.
How did you join Blue Sky, actually?
I wanted to go to New York originally to go to grad school, but then I was like, well, I've been working for 7 years. I don't want to go back to becoming a starving student, so let me see if I can get some work to move there. And I actually had 4 offers lined up. But I had known of Blue Sky's reputation for many years, and we just clicked. So when I met them, I got to go back for 2 days, and I had 4 interviews over 2 days. I remember visiting them, and I think I was only there for maybe 3 hours, 2 hours or whatever, and it was in a very small, kind of garage feel, in a small business park, but it was cool. That's when I kind of knew that this would be the place for me.
At the time, Blue Sky, I think it was founded by one of the guys who worked on the original Tron, right?
Oh yeah, it was Magi Synthevision, and they had developed the seeds of what the CGI studio was during that time. They did 1/3 of the effects of Tron. It was all they call it CSG, constructive solid geometry, I believe that's the right term. But yeah, all that stuff was done by hand on graph paper, and they didn't have interactive viewport playback. So for me, it was always kind of like a full circle thing where, cause like I love Tron and I got to work with the same people that worked on Tron.
And your first project there was Joe's Apartment, right?
Yeah, that was my first movie. Yeah, I worked on a couple of commercials. I remember I had to learn Softimage because I was using Wavefront before that. But I was always jealous of Softimage. I was like, oh man, they have the inverse kinematics, and you could, as a character animator, like, I wish, we didn't have that back in Wavefront. I was doing some beta testing for Kinemation, which would later turn it up in Maya years later. I remember seeing Softimage at SIGGRAPH, and when that demo where they had the finger, and they create a 3-joint skeleton, and they put the end effector, and then I was like, what? Yeah, that was where I was like, I want to be working with that. So yeah, when I got to go to Blue Sky, it was Softimage, the early version. They were going to do a lot of stop motion animation and puppetry and all these other types of animation. I think that they still did use them. I can't really remember how they hooked up with Blue Sky, but for some reason I think one of the producers knew someone, or they were like, hey, you should talk to them about it. We did some early tests to show that we could do it. I actually remember at one point we were talking about maybe trying to do very early form of motion capture. A lot of the animators were like, nah, we don't want to sit there and clean up these like curves and stuff, so it was all done by hand, all hand animated in Soft. But I remember we were in a very small area up in Ossining, and Tim Norquist, the editor, had his editing bay like right out in the middle of the area, so we would hear the songs non-stop playing because everyone's working in their little offices that are surrounding that open area, and we'd hear like the non-stop, funky towel songs or whatever. It was pretty funny to work in that kind of a close-knit environment. Yeah, I think I animated a handful of shots on that. I think I probably did like 5 or 6 shots on that. It was good because it was my first time really like compositing, using like background images and learning how to composite with that or to animate to a scene. And they were really good about, if you want to do other disciplines, like I got to actually learn some of the code for like rendering and stuff. So if I wanted to use some of the rendering code, I could, or help out with lighting. For me, as an animator, it was great because I got to just focus on character animation for like that 7 years when I was there.
Alien Resurrection, those were the swimming aliens, right?
Yeah, that was Softimage. I remember it was a pain because they weren't polygons. It was like NURBS-based modeling. We did it in sections. That's how weird it was, because the model was so heavy that we couldn't rig it up all at once. So we had to rig up in sections and kind of piece it together. One person did the tail, and then one person did the body and arms, and then one person did the head. I'm not like one of these crazy riggers. So like, I have utmost respect for people who can write all the expressions, all the kind of fancy stuff. This is very basic, rudimentary stuff. Like put the skeleton in, maybe do a little set-driven key here and there, or for some of the ligaments stretching stuff. But it wasn't a complicated rig at all. But because the model was so dense and had all that great texture to it, I think that kind of helped. It was all how we made that look a lot more than what that rig was really set to do. Nowadays, it would be like, yeah, we just do it as a low-res polygon and displace it at render time, and rendering it and then rigging would probably be so much more easier to handle. But back then, it was really slow. Like we actually did have a low-res version of the character, and then we would have to by hand transfer all the rotation values to the rig because we didn't have any scripts or anything to do that in Soft. God, I look back and it's like we did that stuff by hand. But yeah, that was a fun shoot. I think we did, in all, I only think we did like 21 shots maybe for Alien, 21 to 24 shots maybe. Yeah, the majority of them were like swimming shots. I did the shot where he jumps out of the water and he takes the first step up. I did maybe like 1 or 2 swimming shots, and then it was like, we had like 5 animators working on it. I remember we had a couple flame artists, and yeah, they did a lot of the compositing and color correction and cleanup on Flame, yeah. At that time we were finishing up Alien. Also, they were trying to push to get the Bunny movie done at the same time. And right around where my cubicle was the wall where they had all the frames, the storyboard frames. And Chris Wedge's office was right next to the other side of the wall. So I was like, save some shots for me. It's like we all wanted to do a shot or two. So I got to, right after when I was done with Alien, I got to work on 2 shots for Bunny. It's a kind of a story about going on to the next stage after you die. And it features an old bunny and a moth. I don't want to give it away. You should watch it and form your own. But it's really cool because it was fur on Bunny and some fur on the moth as well, and flopping around. And it was a fully Radiosity rendered film for the time, which is, no one was doing Radiosity, which was pretty cool, and it has like a nice, richness to it. It was a great short to work on, and we all, I think everyone got to touch it at some point. I think it definitely helped show that, we could do that kind of work. We got the pipeline, and obviously you had to scale it up for Ice Age. I think also we realized that we probably couldn't do it with Softimage at the time. That's why we made the decision to switch to Maya to scale up. I think the goal was always to like get into doing movies. And I remember that one time we had a big meeting, and then it was like, okay, guess what? We're going to stop. We're now going to end the commercial division. We're not going to take any more commercial work, and we're going to become a film studio. And everyone was like, okay, this is it. You know, we're going to do it. And yeah. And then from that point on, I remember then we had to grow, like I think probably 3 times the size of what we were, because we had to start adding some real departments, and we need a real rigging department. And I had found a couple people online that I was following their work, and I think we hired 2 of them. And it's just like, you know, we needed to really kind of ramp up, and we started getting these big names from different studios coming to Blue Sky to help out. And like we had like a layout department, you know, and all these, you know, a real storyboarding department, and all these big departments started, you know, forming. And yeah, it was exciting to see it grow. I actually didn't animate on Ice Age. I kind of was feeling, I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different at the time, and I kind of was thinking more about the cinematography of the movie. So I was like, I'm gonna transition to this new department called layout. And I got to work with Bill Frake, who worked on Iron Giant. So he kind of came in, and we worked with the storyboard people to like, okay, how are we gonna lay this stuff out? And it was a cool transition, because now I can start thinking about laying out camera angles and timing, and we would basically do like A to B to C kind of things and lay out the film. And then that would go off to modeling and then animation. And the first sequence I got to work on was I worked on the Scrat sequence. So I got to lay out that whole intro where the Scrat's going through and taking the net and trying to do whatever. So it was funny, because I got to basically go through and block it out based on the storyboards and try to time it out and kind of, you know, cut it together and let's see if it works. And then that went, and that was the first little thing that ended up becoming like a teaser trailer before the movie came out. The thing I always remember about Chris that I loved was he was always making sound effects already. So like we had like, you know, something like would fall with like the, you know, make something. We all started doing these like little sound effects with our voices, you know, and he was always a natural at that. So that's one thing that I always remember, that he was doing those cool sound effects, and I think it was just natural for him to like, just do the Scrat voice, because he knew what he wanted and he just did it himself. And that's history right there. It's a Scrat, you know.
The movie was quite a success and allowed the studio to grow, but you parted ways with Blue Sky. How so?
Not by choice. So right before the movie was actually completed, there was a big layoff. I don't know why, but Fox, I think that we didn't have anything. We didn't have a second feature ready to go yet, and I think we were so big that they needed to downsize, and it was a big layoff. It's like, I think probably like 75%. A lot of us were really bummed about it, because I was there for 7 years. I would have been still there if I hadn't gotten laid off. I have some friends that didn't get laid off or got hired back, and they've been there for like 25 years. It's always a tough thing, because they were my family when I moved to New York, and it was really a close-knit group, and I really had a great time there. But you know, things happen, and one of the kind of good things that turned out from it was I no longer had to reverse commute out of the city, so I got to work in the city. I got to do some animation direction for a company called Hornet when they were just getting started. Worked on a couple cool commercials for them, and then did a little bit of freelance, and I also head up the redesign department for another production company called Guava. Got to work on that for a couple of years, and then I was kind of getting a little jaded about the whole commercial scene, and that's when I decided to kind of just like, I'm not going to take any more work, I'm just going to start my own little thing and make a toy. And that was like in 2007.
And so since that time, you've been your own boss, if I may say so. This year at SIGGRAPH, what are you showing?
I was asked to do some demos with Sense Labs, and so I'm going to be showing just like some character design stuff and how I use like ZBrush for Maxon. I'm going to do a Maxon demo for them, and then I use Maya, Redshift, Substance Painter. Those are basically like my main apps that I've been using right now. And I am using Unreal, but I'm not going to show anything right now with Unreal.
Maybe you want to add something else for the end of the interview, perhaps?
I would maybe just offer some advice for people looking to get into the industry. I mean, it's never been a better time to find affordable or even free software. I have to give a little shout out to Blender, because it's something that has always been something I've looked at here and there. And I got to go to visit the Blender meetup yesterday and meet Ton for the first time, and I really like the passion about the open source software, and it's free, and you know, it's amazing. You can pretty much do anything you can do in all the other apps. There's just different ways of doing it, but if you want to do something, now is the time to kind of jump in and just do it. It's really easy to afford, and if you're a student and you get a chance to go to SIGGRAPH, come as a student volunteer, because you get it for free. and you get to check out all the stuff. And it's just if you want to kind of get in this line of work, this is the place to kind of like network and meet other people, and just like you form these like relationships and like people that you will just end up knowing for the rest of your career. You'll meet them here at SIGGRAPH. So I'm just really excited to be back this year in person. Yeah, it's really good to be able to see people and meet face to face again. If you want to be a filmmaker or you want to tell stories, I mean, you have all these tools now at your disposal. Blender's free to make your assets, take them into Unreal, or you can even like, there's free assets that you can import into Unreal now. So it's like, the sky's the limit really with what you want to do.